Hello, everyone, and welcome to At Home Health, your foods, your moves, your snooze. Tips and tools for staying fit, fueled, focused, and fresh when things are uncertain. My name is Dr. Kelly Heim. I'm Senior Director of Scientific Affairs for Clean Athlete, and I will be your host for this 45-minute panel discussion. We have retained clinical advisor Leslie Bonci and sponsored certified strength and conditioning specialist and former professional athlete Todd Herriott. Leslie Bonci is the owner of Active Eating, a nutrition consulting company that encourages clients to be fit, fed, and fearless, as well as the co-founder of Performance 365, a sports nutrition consulting company and sports nutrition provider for the XFL. She's also worked as a nutritional consultant for the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Toronto Blue Jays, Carnegie Mellon University Athletics, and the Kansas City Chiefs. Leslie works as a sports dietitian for the Pittsburgh Steelers she's done so for 24 years, and with the NHL's Pittsburgh Penguins, as well as the MLB's Washington Nationals. In addition, she is a nutritionist for the Pittsburgh Ballet Theater and a sports nutrition consultant for the WNBA. Our second guest is Todd Herriott. He's the founder and co-owner of Metier Racing and Coffee. He specializes in coaching and strength and conditioning for endurance athletes. Todd's many years in the pro peloton and his experience as a personal strength coach, performance consultant to amateur and world tour cyclist and group exercise instructor, all of this has allowed him to develop a vast knowledge of what works when it comes to motivating and training an athlete. So I invite you to submit questions using the GoToWebinar toolbar at the right-hand side of your screen under the questions drop-down box. We will answer them as we get to the end of today's session. And if we do run out of time, we will certainly follow up with you via an email. So I want to begin just by saying that at Clean Athlete, we're committed to leading and supporting teams, athletes, training staff, everyone whose physical and mental health is paramount during these uncertain times. And with the recent news of leagues, teams, and athletic conferences suspending or canceling games, seasons, training camps, team gatherings, and the latest postponement of the 2020 Summer Olympics, athletes must safely and effectively maintain their physical performance, their mental health, and all dimensions of wellness while adhering to social distancing guidelines. So today, we're going to offer some information for those impacted by the current health crisis, and we're going to cover the unusual training circumstances, new concerns and considerations surrounding immune health and nutrition, proper sleep, rest, and recovery, as well as tips for adapting to training in a very new and unfamiliar home environment without the proper equipment, and importantly, without your teammates and your coaches and trainers by your side. So today we'll cover, first of all, nutrition, including recommendations on food, diet, supplementation, best practices surrounding hygiene to protect ourselves and those around us, home training and workout tips for athletes accustomed to training in a traditional gym environment, and then finally, last but not least, rest, recovery, and sleep tips and tricks to optimize physical performance and wellness. So we'll start with nutrition, and I'm going to direct the first question to Leslie. Help us understand where athletes should start. So for the weekend warrior, the elite pro athlete, what should they all be focused on cooking and eating right now? Are there any nutrients or ingredients in particular that should be on the plate that may not have been there just a few months ago? And how do they benefit the athlete?
Well, thank you, Kelly, and hi, everybody. And I'm sure right now everybody is worried and focused on supporting their body the best that they possibly can, given these very unusual and frightening circumstances. So when we think about what is necessary, it really is optimizing across the board, optimizing our macros. Are we getting enough protein, carbohydrate, fat? Optimizing our hydros. Are we getting enough fluid? Optimizing our micros. Are we getting enough vitamins and minerals? And optimizing our phytos. Are we getting the phytonutrients from the plants that we eat to help to keep our body as healthy as we possibly can? And if we're looking at the added benefits of the foods that positively impact our health and protect us at that point. So for instance, foods that have probiotics in them is one of the things to want to think about. foods that also provide enjoyment and comfort are critically important, because eating is one of the things that we can control right now. So yes, providing that base that we need to optimize what we do physically, but also providing that reassurance and comfort that is so incredibly necessary right now. So this whole idea of wealth on the shelf, what do you already have in your kitchen that you can use that can help you be the best you can be?
So comfort food that tastes good and is good for you. Isn't that what we all want? That's a
Absolutely.
good goal to have. And this is a good time to help cultivate some of those skills and identifying recipes and other strategies to put something on the table that is comforting, nutritious, and helps you meet your performance goals. So let's be honest, most athletes are just athletes. They're not pros in the kitchen. I can certainly attest to that. The grocery store is a bit overwhelming. What are some simple tips to get athletes accustomed to doing meal prep by themselves? And this may be totally new for a lot of folks. What would you recommend? Where do we
Yeah, and
start?
right. And so first and foremost, going to the grocery store, please be safe. And that means you're wearing a mask when you're in public spaces, you're obeying the physical distancing recommendation. You are making sure that you wipe off that cart before you put your hands on it in the grocery store, and being safe with things that you do at home. Secondly is, I love the idea of maybe making once and heating or eating twice. So you don't necessarily have to prep each and every day. This whole idea of meal assembly rather than cooking. So there might be some things we can mix together, like, oh, I'm making a big pot of chili. Well, that could be over a potato, or that could be in a taco shell, or you could put that over pasta. So it's not like every day we have to feel like we're being a five-star chef in our kitchen. And keeping it simple is absolutely fine. Nobody's coming in and judging, and you certainly don't have to post your creations on social media. But really thinking about what you already know how to do. Now we might have a little bit more time to prep, and what can you get the most out of? And like overnight oatmeal, easy. Pull out that blender and use it. It's more than just a shake. There's a lot of things you can do in a blender, in an Instapot, in a pressure cooker, in a wok, and you may surprise yourself is we come out of this with new skills than we ever had before.
So being resourceful is key here.
Yes.
Not everyone has the luxury of hired nutritionists, so how might someone know whether they're falling short of meeting their nutritional requirements? In circumstances when they're not meeting 100% of their needs from food alone, what are some safe supplement choices that you would recommend, Leslie?
Okay, so the first part of that question, Kelly, is that how do we know? Well, it's kind of like this idea of rate your plate. So when you think about your meals that you eat, is there something on that plate that is protein, whether it is a plant or animal-based source or both? Is there something on your plate that is produce, as fruit and or vegetable? Is there something on your plate that is providing the other carbs in the form of a rice, pasta, bread, potato? Is there something on your plate that is providing fat? If that's avocado, if that's nuts, if it's nut butter, if it's oil. That's the first thing. The second thing is quantity. Is your plate larger than your head? Is it the size of your thigh? Well, maybe that might be a little bit too much. So maybe we need to think about the quantity. We also need to think about the consistency. How many times over the course of the day are we eating, and how many glasses of fluid are we having per day? All of those can be a good checklist to make sure that baseline we're doing the things that we need. Now, that being said, is a supplement is not going to be 100% replacement if we're not doing all of those things, but what might be some things that could be safe, that might be helpful to use right now? Looking at a multivitamin mineral supplement to ensure that we're getting those micronutrients we need to have every day. Thinking about an omega-3, so looking at the fish oil supplements, very, very important from the anti-inflammatory perspective, and not everybody's eating fish that many times a week, or they don't want to go to the grocery store too often. Even thinking about a probiotic supplement, just so that we're doing the things to really help to benefit our gut microbiota. Those would be my top recommendations. And if people are finding it really, really difficult to cook protein for whatever reason, then maybe we might want to throw in there using a protein isolate, because that could be a shake, but that could be also very easily added to food. Whip it into a potato, whip it into a mole sauce, whip it into a guacamole, whip it into an oatmeal, and now we're getting our needs met without the worry.
A great way of looking at this is a checklist. When you look at your plate, it's developing a new instinct for surveying what you're about to eat, and whether you're eating a diverse diet. That's one risk of a time like this, is your diet might not be as diverse as it was before, and what have you cut out? And fish is a great example. And do you need to supplement with something, at least for the short term, to help meet some basic nutritional requirements? That's a nice way of looking at it. In a time like this, how should an athlete prioritize between foundational nutrition and performance? So that's the first question. What are some of the key nutrients an athlete should turn to for foundational health right now?
Well, from my perspective, and I talk to my athletes about this all the time, is you want to be doing those things baseline so that your body is already in the routine, and then you're playing less catch up on the back end of, oh no, now I need to ramp it up for performance. So when we think about that, is this idea of frequency. How many times a day are you eating? When we think about that from the standpoint of consistency, is maybe during the week you eat 4 times a day, maybe on the weekend it's only once. Well, maybe we can find a way to be consistent 7 days out of the week. When we think about that checklist of the plate, that we're not omitting entire groups of food. So, for instance, if somebody says, well, I'm not a green vegetable eater, well, guess what? There's a lot of other colors to choose from, or the same thing with fruit. So we could do that. Or if somebody says, well, fresh is always better, we get the same benefit out of using canned. We don't have to feel guilty about that. So that is an option as well, is really looking at that plate and saying, how does my food make me feel over the course of the day from an energy perspective? Well, I'm really significantly cutting my carbs and I'm ready to drop on the floor. That could be a problem. That should be a red flag. And really thinking about this, is using this time is a great time to really get all your ducks in a row, so to speak, to really think about each and every meal as an opportunity to truly fuel the body the best that it can be, so that when we're able to get back out there to performing and on the circuit, et cetera, it's like, okay, now I can focus on the performance and I don't have to go back and really have to do my eating all over again.
Yeah, that's very insightful to come out of this time with a kind of a position to excel in performance, having covered all your foundational bases and being poised to go to the next level. It's a great way of looking at this window of opportunity. If supplementation is indicated for a certain athlete, what should they look for? This is a broad question, but do you have any just general guidelines, Leslie?
Yeah, and so first of all, because from my perspective, it's safe, smart, selective, sure. I want my athletes to be that way all the time. So when we are picking a supplement, we want to pick a supplement that's done that for us. So not only what is in the product per se, but what do we see on the label of the product? Do we see that designation of NSF certified for sport? That takes the guesswork out of the equation. Then you know that you're consuming something that is not going to be problematic. Secondly, when we're thinking about supplementation, I think it's very important to take a good hard look at what we are doing currently in terms of our eating and saying, oh, maybe I am a little deficient on certain aspects of diet. Then those are the types of things from a supplement perspective that we might want to gravitate towards, because that helps to round out the edges, so to speak. And third is being creative. If you're going to use supplements, realize it's not to the exclusion of using food, but use it the right way. So again, this idea of a protein powder doesn't have to be mixed up in a glass. What else could you do with that for somebody who tends to not want to cook a lot of animal protein for whatever reason? That can be a really good way of ensuring that you're getting in enough each and every day. And remember, at the end of the day, for all of us, too much is not the goal. We want to optimize what we do, but there's no reason to be excess.
I'll add to that just some basic considerations for foundational nutrition, probably a multivitamin, maybe some vitamin D, fish oil, a probiotic. I think those would be my top four. Would you agree with that, Leslie?
I would, and I alluded to that earlier. And the vitamin D, and certainly the research that has looked at it, not only do we know that it is critically important for bone health, but in terms of supporting a healthy immune system, which for all of us should be top of mind at the moment.
Absolutely. Could you share some tips to help keep meals creative and fresh when they might get kind of boring after you cook the same 10 things over and over again over several weeks? I know I'm falling into that trap.
Yeah, so one of the things that I always like to do is create a flavor station. So most of us probably have some herbs and spices in our cupboard, and that can be a great way to put a different spin on what it is that we're eating. Or, oh, I used a flavored vinegar instead of the same old all the time. Or, wow, I tried a little cumin to replace cayenne, and oh, that tasted a little bit different. The second thing would be to think about the textures of food. So if you're eating a meal that's primarily mushy, that happens to be a consistency I can't stand. Is, I like crunchy. So what can crunch something up? Well, if you bake something at a high temperature and you make it a little bit more crunchy, that can make something enjoyable, as well as mixing the temperatures. So maybe you have your pasta that normally you would eat it hot. Well, what's the matter with a cold pasta salad? Absolutely nothing. And this whole idea of layering, that's why bowls are so popular. That's why Chipotle is so popular right now, because you can layer that bowl and you can change it up and it looks a little different, and your fork is going down through different layers and flavors, and it's much more enjoyable to eat it than just a piece of meat on the plate with some vegetables and rice. That might be a little bit more uninspiring.
Yeah, great advice. Choosing different cooking methods to cook some of the same things that you love is a great way to get around that. Self-care is a hot topic right now, needless to say. What advice would you have for making healthy choices in the kitchen when it comes to cravings, knowing the ease of calling a restaurant for pizza delivery and go-to orders and so forth?
Yeah, and so right now, when everybody is feeling so unnerved and so many things that are out of our control, we're usually not finding a lot of comfort in gnawing on a head of kale, unless maybe we're a four-legged creature with a tail. But this whole idea right now of sit, savor, chew, because many of us have more time on our hands right now. So we actually have the luxury of being able to sit down and enjoy what it is that we are eating, is not necessarily shoveling food in. It's drive-by eating to go on to the next thing. So that's the first thing that can really, really help. Secondly, is when it comes to cravings, is what do we really want? Not for everybody is it just something sweet or just something salty. Is what else can we throw in there in the mix? Can we do something that maybe has a little bit of a sour, sweet and sour, or salty sour? Those types of things together can make foods a little bit more enjoyable. If we are going to be ordering out, yeah, pizza's fine, but what could you accompany that with? Do you have anything at home? Oh, look, I have a can of minestrone soup. Maybe I'll have that with it. Or, oh, look, maybe I have some canned mushrooms or something else I could put on the pizza, so I'm getting a little bit more produce in what it is that I'm eating. We're still then embracing the self-care. We're still doing the comfort, but it's value added in terms of what it is that we're eating. So we're keeping the priority for our self-health top of mind.
Very good. We're going to go on to hygiene. So the first question I'm going to direct to Todd. So hygiene obviously is a top priority right now. In addition to washing our hands often, what are some key food safety tips, methods, and benefits? And Leslie, if you want to jump in, feel free.
Okay.
First, good morning from Seattle, and thanks for having me on. And Leslie, thank you for all those great comments. I just learned a lot, so thank you for that. You're asking me about key food safety tips, methods, and benefits.
Yes.
Hygiene obviously is one of the biggest things we're dealing with now, but it's always been a big topic. Now we're all having to be a lot more mindful of it. I can speak for myself in my own home. As soon as we walk into the kitchen, we're washing our hands for a good 20 seconds at a crack, which 20 seconds seems like a lifetime when you're washing your hands, but I think it's super important. And we're wiping down the counters every day, 2 or 3 times a day. And when we do go to the store, we get a delivery, we're making sure we wipe down the containers as best we can. And again, continue to wash our hands. I think those are things we should be doing anyway for the most part, but obviously now with the way things are, we're being a lot more mindful about it.
Yeah, it's certainly
Yes.
a new skill set for us and for everyone, but probably a good thing to learn and adopt for general safety and wellness overall.
One thing that I hadn't done for, oh, I'm sorry. One thing I hadn't done for a long time. Sorry. Washing fruits and vegetables, which, we get a little bit, I've gotten lazy with that over time because, I wasn't getting sick from anything. But taking some extra time and washing your fruits and vegetables well also, I think, makes a big difference.
Yes, and it's absolutely, and that's absolutely, Todd, that's what I was going to say. It is absolutely critical to do that, because when you're in the grocery store, we certainly don't know who has touched those fruits and vegetables before we touch them when we're buying fresh items. And also, please don't anybody soak your produce in bleach. Don't do that. You don't need to do that. As long as you are scrubbing your fruits and vegetables under forceful cold running water, that's absolutely fine.
Great advice. How might hygiene practices for an athlete differ compared to a non-athlete? As athletes, we often think of ourselves as different and special and having unique needs. This is just a common question that athletes have. What considerations should be on top of mind right now? And
Well,
either of you can address this.
I think that, athletes typically, you go to the gym or you finish your workout, you're pretty sweaty, and you take off your stuff and you chuck it in the corner sometimes, or you put it back in your gym bag and you kind of forget about it, or you might wear a t-shirt twice, or God forbid a cyclist wears a chamois a couple different times, maybe in the 80s, but times have changed. But making sure you wash your clothes, and making sure you're really mindful about cleaning up after yourself, which is, I think everybody should do that. I don't think this is new, but I think sometimes we get lazy with that stuff and might just grab something that we already used before, or put on a pair of gloves we've been, or a pair of socks or whatever it might be. I think we should always make sure that we're, especially now, going back and washing our stuff.
Yeah.
And I would add to that is your water bottle, whatever it is you're bringing with you, for heaven's sakes, they need to be washed. They need to be cleaned each and every day. Absolutely essential to do that.
I was riding into work this morning, and I was drinking out of a water bottle that I think had been on my bike for about 2 weeks. And I think that happens a lot sometimes to people, and that's a huge thing. I think washing your water bottles every time you use them is a big deal. And just like anything, it's not a big deal until it's a big deal, right? It's like, wow,
exactly.
All of a sudden I'm really sick because I drank coffee that was on my desk for a week and had milk in it. That actually happened to me the other day as well. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, well, we're learning as we go here, and we're discovering some bad habits that we've probably had for some time, but better late than never, right? For families that are under the same roof, what are some additional steps that they could take during daily activities, meal prep, and in-home exercise and training sessions? And I'm going to direct this to you, Leslie.
Okay, so from the food safety perspective, this is, if you have little ones in the house, it's really a great time to teach them of all these things, of the importance of washing hands. Everybody can sing a medley while we're doing that together, or teaching everybody how to wipe down the surfaces. But in addition to that, not sharing dishes. This is not the time to be serving family style. It isn't. Everybody has their own plate. Mom and dad, don't eat the leftovers off your kids' plates, or vice versa right now. We don't want to be doing that. Same thing with taking sips out of somebody else's cup, whether it's coffee that's been sitting for a week with milk. That image is now seared in my brain. Thank you, guys. Or double dipping with anything is, oh, how much with a little piece of a pita chip? Let me dip it in again, and there's the saliva all over the place. I'm hoping out of all of this that people actually come away with better habits than they ever had before. And that helps to reduce the risk of foodborne illness, whether or not we're in this crisis state that we are right now.
Yeah, so it's a win-win. These good habits you should carry with you forever for a good reason. Next question I will direct to Todd. We are all aware of the importance of social distancing right now. What specifically does this mean for athletes? And what are some additional tips to continue exercising and training safely? That's a big one. Can I still do group training sessions or group rides and runs while adhering to these safety guidelines? Is that possible?
Well, that's a huge question right now, and everybody's talking about it. I come from the cycling world, so obviously in the cycling world, it's a huge thing because people like to ride in groups and they race in packs. But we have a responsibility to each other right now, and we have to follow the guidelines. And it's easy to say, well, I'm just going to go out and ride with a couple guys. It's not a big deal. But it is a big deal, and we have to look out for each other, and we have to set a precedent. And this time is going to pass, and maybe taking some time to train by yourself is a nice departure from the norm. I know, we're packing animals to begin with, and we like to do things together. but it's also a good opportunity to get in touch with yourself a little bit, go out and train by yourself. It's a different way to approach training, and I think it's super healthy. It takes us out of our norm. It's an opportunity in a lot of ways to try some new things, and we're kind of being forced to. So I think we all have a responsibility to each other to follow the guidelines.
I absolutely agree with that. This one I'm going to direct to you as well, Todd. With a safety first approach, what sanitary steps should athletes practice when they're prioritizing exercise and incorporating at-home training into their daily routines?
I think you just have to have your space that you do your thing in, and you just have to keep it, just like always, you should just keep it clean. When you go into your training space, or when you finish in your training space, wipe everything down, wash your hands when you're done. Throw your dirty clothes and your dirty towels into the wash and move on. It's just, again, we keep going back to saying that these are things we should be doing anyway, but it's a good reminder that we should be doing them and get back into the habit of doing things like that, because sweating all over the place is unsanitary to begin with, and most people don't have big home gyms in their spaces. They're throwing down a mat in their living room or in their garage, which are big open spaces to begin with. So I think we just have to be, again, hyper conscious about where we're at and what we're doing.
Very good. This last question in our hygiene portion, I will direct to Leslie. In addition to the benefits of ensuring quality, clean food, what are some additional benefits of meal prep and cooking? And what should athletes get excited about?
Well, one of the first ones is, and there are studies that have looked at this, is part of the enjoyment of food is not just the hand to mouth activity, but things that happen prior to that. So if we are engaged in the process, whether it's as simple as opening a package to a little bit more complex, chopping, stirring, flipping, all those types of things, that's part of how we enjoy food. So if, for instance, some people workouts are cut down or they're diminished or whatever, then what it is they would normally do is say, oh no, I don't want to change my body weight during this whole process, then being engaged in the process of food prep may help because it provides that vicarious pleasure. The other thing is, I've never in my life met a chef who's sitting while they're doing food prep. You're not. You're standing, you're moving. Make a loaf of bread, that is, if you can find flour right now, and knead it. It's hard work. Toss a pizza shell. Hopefully it doesn't get stuck on your ceiling. When we do these things, then it is physical activity. Primarily it's upper body movement, but you want to combine it. I have an iron skillet, so you know what? We can get like a kettlebell workout. Instead of using the kettlebell, it's an iron skillet, and at the end of it, I have spaghetti sauce that hopefully hasn't found its way to my ceiling.
I can picture that happening in my kitchen for sure, Leslie. It hasn't happened yet. It might.
Well, come over. I'll show you how easy it is for that to happen. Yes.
Yeah. I will say that I am deeply aware of the value of seeing cooking as training. And that's one of the ways I've gotten excited about meal prep right now, given the fact that I'm not much of a cook and this whole thing has been a little bit overwhelming. But just changing your perspective and seeing what you do around food and in the kitchen is training. It might help shift your mind into a more positive state, and that everything you're doing in the kitchen is just as important as everything you're doing in your training.
And not only that, you're probably going to end up saving some money, so you have more money available for other things once we all come through this process.
Absolutely. It's all about seeing the silver lining, and that's definitely a good point. So let's switch gears to in-home training. This is an important topic for everyone. I'm going to direct this first question to you, Todd. Many athletes used to training in a traditional gym environment might be feeling completely lost without their familiar equipment like weights, benches, machines. What would you say to athletes who now find themselves in an unfamiliar space without those comforts that they're so used to in their typical environment?
Well, we're creatures of habit, and we like to do the things that we like to do. Certainly, a lot of athletes that I've worked with over the years who haven't had structured programs, when we start talking what they've been doing and what they like to do, people do the things that they're good at, the things they like doing, and they get kind of stuck on their little boxes. And I keep saying to my athletes that this is a pretty, everybody knows it's a crazy time, but I'm trying to look at it as an opportunity to different things, to try different things. that I wouldn't maybe otherwise have the time to do, because life gets so incredibly busy and we're always trying to keep up with the Joneses, and we're just overly stimulated all the time. And now we actually have some, I don't want to call it extra time, but we have some time on our hands that we might not always have or be used to having. So I think, you know, doing something different is a really good thing, and it's good for your mind, it's good for your body, and it can also be motivating too. So I understand how people would be down and out about not being able to do the things that they're used to doing. I'm one of those people, but you know, I'm finding myself going out in my backyard and doing and jumping around in ways that I haven't jumped around in my backyard before. So there's always something different that you can do.
One of the key tenets of bodybuilding, one of the most important things to keep in mind, this is my sport, is muscle confusion and switching up your workouts, periodization, and not doing the same exercises all the time. And this has kind of forced individuals in my sport to change up their entire training session from the bottom up. And I see that that is a potential win, because you're exposing your muscles to different angles and different tensions, completely different ways of stimulating a training response and a hypertrophy response, or whatever your goal is. So there is a particular advantage of something like this, a time like this, when you can see it as an opportunity to try out something new, and that might actually enhance your performance if if you're doing something your body's not used to doing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think people get really structured, and I think being structured is really important, especially if you're results based, for sure. But a little unstructure, I think, can go a really long way for people, both mentally for sure and physically. And this is, you know, we all know this. Well, we don't know for sure, but we don't think this is going to last more than maybe a month or two more, and that's actually not that much time. So a stimulus is a stimulus to your body. It doesn't know if it's coming from a bike or from a machine or whatever. It just knows it's being overloaded. So again, I think it's an opportunity. Your points are spot on.
So let's look at an athlete who's trying to set up a home workout space for the first time. What are some key considerations to help them get it right the first time?
There are a lot of different places you can go to get information about your home workout space. The internet has opened up the doors for sure. If you punch in home workout space, you're going to get a lot of a different advice. My advice is to keep it simple. You don't need a lot of equipment to do anything. And most people think they need a big space. A small space is fine. I just make sure it's got air, a little bit of sunlight. A backyard is fine. A driveway works, but you don't need a lot of fancy equipment to get stuff done. And if we're talking about changing modalities a little bit, most people don't spend a lot of time, you know, on their mobility or their flexibility, and maybe, you know, you don't need a lot of space to do that. So don't feel like you need to order a bunch of new gear to get your home gym set up, because chances are really good when the smoke clears, you're probably not going to spend a lot of time in the home doing your training. So I would say keep it really simple. People are asking me all the time what I should buy for the house, and I'm trying to keep them from going crazy. And you know, don't buy a treadmill, don't buy a Precor unless that's something that you had a lot of space for and you'd planned on doing anyway. But simple is good, and less overwhelming. It's one less thing to have to figure out.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You can get a lot accomplished with a set of resistance bands, a space that's big enough to, do some body weight exercises and mobility exercises.
Throw a rock around your backyard.
The weather is getting nicer, and that's one way to use your outdoor space if you do have an outdoor space. Just yesterday, I brought my weights outside, and it was a beautiful day, and I just thought, this isn't so bad. I had the music playing, I could change the station as opposed to, being in my traditional gym environment. So you can find ways to really enjoy these times when it's just you and your training and your own space. So let's move on to the next question. This is for you, Todd. Can you share some tips for in-home workouts geared towards individuals who may be using this time to start living a healthier, more active lifestyle and trying to incorporate exercise more regularly into their daily schedule? So we're thinking about those fitness-minded folks who kind of want to get into this and get more serious about it. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, this goes back to the opportunity. You're home all of a sudden all day, and I don't go to the gym in the morning because I wake up too late, and at the end of the day I'm too tired. Hey, this is a great opportunity to jump into getting your engine started again. It's never too late. One thing I would encourage people not to do is overdo it. Your first workout doesn't have to be an hour of plyometrics in your living room. Just getting out for a walk for a lot of people is a big day of exercise. And, most people are stuck in the office all day. You go for a walk every day, 10 minutes of walking, if you multiply that times a week, that's over an hour. Some people don't walk at all during the day except to their desk and back to their car. So it's a great time to get into a new modality for sure. But again, keep it walking is exercise. Keep it simple. There's plenty of training programs available now through apps and online, which is great. There's more than that than ever, especially now. So it's not hard for somebody to tap in to something new. But my big recommendation is to start slowly. You don't want to have to be going to the emergency room next week if you don't have to.
Yeah, great point. You don't want to be in a situation when you need medical care. So how would you approach athletes training at peak levels? So let's take the elite athlete or a higher level competitive athlete, those who are preparing for seasons, games, competitions, and peak performance. What advice would you have for them?
Well, I'm working with a lot of those people now in the cycling world, and needless to say, people are pretty bummed out that they've spent many months preparing for the season. Some of my guys are on some of the best form they've ever had, and they're not able to really use it. But again, I say it's an opportunity. Everybody's in the same boat. And most of the guys from the cycling world, can't ride outside at all, and they're being forced to ride indoors, which most people do not enjoy at all. So trying to get somebody to, who's riding 20 plus hours a week to ride 20 hours inside is a really tall order, and I'd say probably not a great idea if you want to keep your mind intact. But there's a lot of things that elites can work on that they don't normally work on because they're just, it's volume and racing and traveling. The mental side of the sport is one that, is often talked about, but I don't know how many people actually really dive into it and start figuring out how, to get their mind working a little bit more sharply. There's all kinds of literature out there about mental training, and there's all kinds of webinars out there and whatnot. And I think that's something that guys should really take the time to jump into because they have time to do that. And just resting more. Everybody's always on the go. Rest is, a key to success in any sport, especially for elites. So the volume is coming down for most people, if not everybody, for sure. You can maintain intensity certainly, but changing gears and working on the mental aspect of the sport, maybe get into more mobility and stretching. Meditation is a great thing, or focused breathing, things that you might normally not pay that much attention to, instead of just go. And cooking too, that's another thing. Leslie was talking about cooking, because cooking is training. I mean, you're doing something, you're focusing on your health and your wellness. Most cyclists can make pasta and oatmeal. So it's an opportunity to do some new things.
Yeah, I see it as a drawing board period where you can look at your training, your lifestyle, everything that you're just so used to doing, and stop for a moment and really think, what other stones can I turn over here that I can make sure that when I do come back full time, when life is back to normal, that I can improve my game all around. And simple experiments with resting, reductions in training volume, although they're unwelcome. We don't like to stop training. We don't like to reduce our training volume, but sometimes there's a key learning there that we didn't anticipate, and that's, wow, we feel better, more energy. We're able to put in more intensity. So listen to your body when you're making these small changes, and maybe even keep a journal just so that you can learn about how your body responds to some of these different things, like improving your mobility. That alone might increase performance. So I would say that this is an opportunity to kind of identify some of those other things we could be doing overall moving forward.
Good call on the journal. Most people don't even know how to write their name anymore because we're always typing. I've always encouraged my athletes to keep a journal. It's a really nice way to just kick back and really think instead of jumping on the keyboard or onto a video game. I mean, it's hard to do to get into that rhythm. But even if you take 5 minutes and just jot down your thoughts, it's a great gateway.
What are the top 5 workouts you would recommend for any athlete right now? If you could just name 5 basic workouts, what would they be?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that because there's so many things you could do. But I'm gonna list the ones that I've been telling people about. And number 1, jump rope. I love a jump rope. They're basic, they're simple. You don't need a lot of space to do it. It's great exercise. It's great coordination. It's great stability training. It's core work. There's a cardio piece to it. Most people don't like it because they're not very good at it. Because if you don't spend time doing something, you probably won't be very good at it. So if you can jump rope for 5 minutes straight without stopping, that's something to write in your journal. Basic yoga. I've been around yoga my whole life. I've never really jumped into it. But because I think for me personally, it was just overwhelming. But basic yoga is just that basic, and that'll help with your mobility and your stability and your flexibility. And there's, if you jump online and punch in basic yoga on YouTube, you can spend weeks. Kettlebell swinging. I'm a huge fan of kettlebell training. First and foremost, because it's explosive, and that's a big part of sport, and it's also very focused on the posterior chain. Kettlebell swing is kind of a technical thing, but for the most part, you won't hurt yourself if you're not using a huge kettlebell. Probably 12 to 16 kilos is a great start weight. And again, jump on the internet and punch in kettlebell swing. I'm from the RKC world. RKC has a channel on YouTube, and you can learn about swings there as well, easily. Foundation training, the founder's move, and decompression breathing, which is sort of the cornerstone of that. Training, postures and positions that lengthen and strengthen simultaneously. That's what foundations training is. They also have a great website that I would encourage people to check out, and you don't need any equipment for that. It's along the same lines of yoga, though it is not yoga. And then number 5, which could have been number 1, is medicine ball training. Medicine ball is really fun. You work in 3 planes of motion. It's core work, it's cardio, it's balance, it's hand-eye coordination. You can play it with a partner. You can throw it off a wall, bounce it off the ground. They're inexpensive. They don't take up much space. Those are the 5 that I'd really preach about. I think they're great. You can do all of those in the same day, actually, if you wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. So we only have a few minutes left, but let's just go through some of these last questions. What are some concerns athletes should be aware of when they're transitioning to in-home workouts?
Well-ventilated space, I think, is important. Fan, surface is important too. Make sure that the surface is clear. If you're in the garage and there's, oil on the floor or rocks or whatever, grit. Having some sun, I think, is really helpful too. Good music. You got to have good music. And there's going to be a drop in volume. We talked about that earlier, just because, if you're used to training, 20 plus hours a week, and I'm talking about the elites, that's going to be hard to do. If you're just new to exercise again and getting back into it, training 7-8 hours a week is a lot. So that's not a bad thing if you're just getting back into it again. But I think having well ventilated space is really important, and just making sure it's clean.
Yeah, great advice. What about families looking to keep both adults and children active together? Any tips for them?
Yeah, I think, as someone who has a couple kids, 3 years old and almost 4 months old, what do you do to not lose your mind in the house? And there's a lot of kids in my neighborhood that I live in as well. And there's all sorts of family games you could do together outside. Playing tag is awesome. You're running around. Of course, you're touching each other, but you're hanging out with the same people all day. And if you're socially isolating with your family, I think that's okay. Basketball or Nerf hoop. I'm a big fan of the Nerf hoop. Walks and hikes as a family. Pulling a wagon around, good stuff. Playing catch with a medicine ball. yard work is actually really hard. I'm sore today from working in my yard yesterday, and I think I'm in pretty good shape. But you're bending over, you're picking up stuff, you're dragging stuff, chopping, clipping, raking. I'm trying to get my daughter into yard work. She doesn't seem to be taking to it. She just runs off down the street, which is not a great idea. But
I think it's an acquired taste.
yeah, you know, doing stuff as a family. I mean, people are hanging out with their families more than ever. That is a really good thing. Most people aren't used to spending with their kids, and I'm certain that it's overwhelming for a lot of people, because it is. But doing stuff together that's fun outdoors, especially when you can, it's just great. And I think this is going to be, it should be the new norm. It should be getting us back to basics again. You know, playing and working and having fun together is sort of what it's all about. So again, I keep saying it's an opportunity, and in a lot of ways it isn't for a lot of people, but I'm looking at it as an opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. For athletes who are accustomed to training in group environments, what are some tips you would recommend to stay connected, motivated, inspired now in a more isolated and lonely training environment? Touched on it earlier. Anything to add?
Well, again, coming from the cycling side of things, you know, there's an app called Zwift where you can, you know, ride with people all around the world and type messages and connect that way. I think it's great. People, like I said, we're pack animals. We like to spend time talking to people and hanging out. And from a distance, we're able to do that now with things like the Skype and the FaceTime, which we were able to do before. But when we were talking about that before the webinar started, about how all of these apps and go to this and webinar that's are happening. And yeah, we have to use them and stay connected, because it can get really lonely. And when you start to get lonely, it's easy to get depressed. And again, it doesn't have to be that way. Connect with your friends.
With so much focus right now on the physical side of things, physical health, it's very easy to overlook the importance of mental health. And you just mentioned that loneliness and the mental health impact of that, I think, is affecting an unprecedented percentage of this population. So how does training and exercise fit into that paradigm?
I can tell you from a personal experience, as a guy who was a professional athlete and now works with professional athletes and doesn't have a lot of time to train and whatnot. When I ride my bike after not riding my bike for a couple weeks, I just feel so much better. Moving is really, really good for you. Getting fresh air is really, really good for you. Physical health, I mean, being physical has always been a part of our mental health. Again, that's not new. Again, I think we're all just being reminded that how important training to me is moving. You know, if you're there's training with purpose, which is sort of a results-based approach to things. Like I'm racing this year, and there's a lot of races I want to do well at. I mean, I have to train for those. And then there's just training for life, which is you never stop moving and doing things. But we do stop moving and doing things because we get into our routines, and we do the same things over and over and over again. And certain parts of our system start to go to sleep. They don't go away, but they go to sleep. But guess what? You can wake them back up again too. So I think for all of us, taking a look at how we do things and how we move, you know, this is the time to do that. So keep moving.
Yeah, great advice for everyone.
I went off the deep end with that one a little bit, but you know, life is a sport, and as corny as that sound, it is. I mean, working on the yard, cooking in the kitchen, you know, folding laundry, carrying kids around, that's working out.
Yeah,
it's working out.
Agreed. Yeah, and the way we see exercise is probably going to change a little bit, and physical activity it certainly counts, whether it's yard work or whether it's training. So we've already answered this question, you know, the challenges we faced, some of the performance benefits, just changing up the training, experimenting with rest, just keeping a journal. So I'm going to skip over into rest, recovery, and sleep just for the last few minutes so we have together. So Todd, I'm just going to hand this one over to you. With most people working and training from home, what are some best practices to help them stay focused on tasks, the job, training, family? How do you balance it all while protecting your own time and allowing yourself to rest and recover?
Yeah, I've always had an issue with the word balance because it's really tricky once you get into your life. It's a lot easier to have balance when you have, you know, one thing to do all day. You know, if you're single and you don't have kids and you know you're working from home, it's I think a little less stressful in trying to figure out your day. But if you're not used to being around your kids all day long every day, and you're trying to work, and you're trying to get in some time for yourself to work out, I mean, that is a real test. But I think the reality is you need to schedule it. You need to take care of yourself. And I'm a better person when I take care of myself. I'm more calm, cool, and relaxed. And we just need to, you need to talk to your spouse, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, your partner, whatever, and just make sure that there's a schedule that is sustainable and practical, and then do your best to adhere to it, because you can't do everything at once. Certainly not well. And you have to take time. When your kids need you, your kids need you. So you can't just disappear for 2 hours to go for a long walk. So I think having a schedule and making time for yourself is the key to success with that.
So scheduling that time is just going back to the self-care topic. It's the same subject of self-care. Leslie, I'm going to direct this question to you. What are some important steps to help athletes not only take care of loved ones, but also focus on themselves?
Well, one of them is finding those ways to be able to rest, because active rest actually helps us to recover. Finding those ways to relax, and maybe it's playing a board game with your family, something you haven't done in a long time, can just be kind of fun, a fun focus. Absolutely making sure that we turn off the news. It's like this 24/7 rolling on and on and on is just taking everybody's stress level through the roof. So find a way to disconnect from it. And also, I think not feeling guilty about changing the bar. You might have a particular performance bar of expectations that you have of what you should be doing physically. And that doesn't mean, well, I'm not doing anything, but it means that maybe it's time to reevaluate it and be in the moment right now and do what it is that you can do, but making sure that you're not adding more to the stressful situation with the guilt or the worry or the whatever it might be. We really, at this time, have to be kind to ourselves. That is truly not being selfish. That is self-care.
Rest and recovery, Leslie. What advice do you have for athletes with rest to help them rest and recover? So this question is kind of general, but do you have any general tips and guidelines to help individuals try to navigate the rest and recovery picture?
Yes. And so when we're looking at the rest aspect of this, is to really think about what it is that you are doing with your eating that might be getting in the way of good quality rest. So for instance, if somebody is now over relying on coffee because they're home more and they're running back to have a cup every 5 minutes, that might be a problem. Or even over relying on alcohol right now, because that does interfere with sound sleep too. Well, schedules are out of whack. So, I'm having a meal at 1 o'clock at night and I don't understand why I'm not sleeping. Is trying to keep that consistency, making sure that we have about 90 minutes from the time we have our last meal until we try and sleep. And also, even though the type of workouts you do might change for our elite athletes, the quality of that workout or the intensity of that workout may still be there. So keeping those same things in place that you normally would do. Are you hydrating pre and post? Are you parenthesizing your workouts with something to eat on the front end and the back end? If you're doing something that's lasting longer than an hour, are you making sure that during that bout of exercise, you are helping to nourish your body? So we may be changing the overall what we choose or how much we choose, but we're not taking it off the plate entirely. That's still critically important.
If you had to recommend 2 supplements for rest and recovery, Leslie, what would they be?
I think one of the things that can be critically important from a recovery aspect, if we're going to look at a protein or maybe a protein carbohydrate together, if we're looking at optimal rest, melatonin might be a really good one. And a melatonin in the supplement form limits the likelihood that we're going to take that tart cherry juice with a little bit of tart cherry juice and a lot of vodka. So I think it works better all the way around. I'm just saying.
Wonderful. Todd, I'm going to direct this last question to you. Sometimes the evening's the only time that we have to get a good workout in. Are there any advice? Is there any concern that you would have for someone working out later in the day and its effect on sleep? Is it different for everyone? Is this the only option? Any tips to ensure a smooth transition into bedtime?
I think you need to set yourself up for success with this. And I think everybody knows that your energy levels are higher, you know, late morning, early in the afternoon, and less so in the evenings. But some people simply just don't have a choice. So I'd rather see someone do the training in the evening than not do it at all. So when I say set yourself up for success, if you start your workout, let's say 6:30, if you haven't eaten since 11 a.m., that's not setting yourself up for success. So make sure that you have fueled yourself up so that when you actually do the training, it's going to be effective and high quality, and plan for it. And as far as when you complete it, you know, if you finish your training session, you know, 8 o'clock, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., eating dinner at 10 o'clock probably isn't the greatest of ideas in terms of trying to get quality sleep. But you do need to refuel and replenish after your session. So, you know, if you're doing an hour session, you don't need to eat 1,000 calories when you're done, but you do need to top off your glycogen. So I think you just need to be very mindful about how much you eat before bed, because it's going to be hard for you to sleep on a really full stomach. At least for me, it is. So once you finish your training, take the shower, you know, have your recovery bottle, maybe right after your ride, and maybe just a light dinner, and then give yourself at least, I'd say, a couple hours before you go to bed, just so, you know, you get into your sleep routine. Maybe a nice cup of tea. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great, Todd. I could go for that right now, although it's not quite bedtime yet. So
Soon.
let's, yeah, let's go on to some questions from the audience, the Q&A session, while we still have time. This question I think is for Leslie. Is if someone is typically eating a well-balanced diet, does cutting a supplement intake in half, such as a multivitamin or omega-3s, does that make sense? Is that something that someone would benefit from? Is there a need for that?
Yeah, it isn't necessary to do that, because supplements are formulated in a very, very specific way. And it's not the same as, oh, for instance, I'm taking an omega-3 is, oh, well, that's the same thing as eating a salmon. I mean, it isn't. So you don't worry about it. And what you definitely want to do is make sure you follow the dosing directions on the package so that you're not taking something to excess. But if you think about an omega-3 capsule, if you're going to cut it, the oil is going to spill out. That's really, you're going to be lapping it up off the counter, and we can't do that anyways right now. That's not safe. So no, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. The clean athlete supplements are perfectly appropriate for someone who is just trying to meet their nutritional needs on a general foundational and a performance level. So we have you in mind when we're formulating we have the elite athlete in mind, we have the amateur in mind, we have the everyday fitness enthusiast, or any person who's just trying to live a healthy active lifestyle. So you don't need to second guess the dosing. Although there is nothing wrong with skipping a day, you know, with your multivitamin, or skipping a day here and there if you forget, that's fine. You just want to create a consistency and some kind of a continuous routine. Here's another question. How often should I be going to the grocery store? This is from our audience. How many meals should I be planning for? Any advice from Leslie or Todd, either of you, and have any insight into that?
Well, I mean, I'm in Pittsburgh, and I know they're strongly urging people, as we think the peak is going to be these next 2 weeks, of not going to the grocery store. At maximum, it's going to be once a week. That's probably a little bit too much right now. So what I really would suggest that everybody do is, first of all, do an inventory of what you already have at home. Chances are, and most of us, we see the first layer of whatever's there in our cupboard and say, oh, that's it, I don't have anything else. Well, oh, look, there's that other box of oatmeal or pasta, or there's some canned beans in there, or canned tomatoes, or, oh, I can chip the ice off what's in my freezer and find something usable, so that we can minimize those trips to the grocery store. It's your safety as well as the safety of everybody else that is out there. And plus, you'll save some money as well.
Just going back to what you said earlier about canned and frozen being perfectly fine, this is a great chance to stock up on some of those things to save yourself a trip.
Or you can do delivery groceries too, but again, you make sure you specify if you want to do that, and have them drop it off on you. No actual contact with the person who's dropping them off to you. That is an option too, but do your own inventory before you even pursue that.
Here's another question from the audience. Are there any foods that support sleep? Leslie, you might want to chime in here.
Well, when we're looking at first of all, is making sure that you are not undercutting your calories or being excessive with your calories, because too much before bed means you're ready for a siesta and your stomach's having a fiesta, and that's not good. So that's the first thing. Secondly, when we look at what might be helpful, we know that carbohydrates may have a role to play in terms of indirectly influencing serotonin production, which might help the body to relax. So even if somebody says, I'm going to do a bowl of cereal before bed, or maybe I'm going to do something like a smoothie and use a protein as a base and add some fruit to it, that tends to work very well. Ideally, what I really like people to think about, if we're going to have something before bed, is make it snack size, not meal size, so that you're really thinking about the volume, not excess with liquid. Otherwise, your sleep's going to be disrupted overnight. And certainly, at nighttime is probably not the time for a mocha frappuccino. You really don't want to have that caffeine in the evening.
Yeah, again, these are just good habits to cultivate. If you haven't already, this is a good chance to get into these habits. So Leslie and Todd, any final tips, advice, or information you want to share with our athletes to help them maximize their health during this time and knowing that it's changing every day?
My closing comment would just be, being mindful. Mindfulness is a huge thing, and we talk about good health and being mindful and taking care of people and being friendly, and then we get caught up in our day-to-day routines, which are oftentimes chaotic, and we're overly stimulated all the time. And I keep saying the word opportunity, and I really believe in the midst of all of this chaos that resetting ourselves to be more mindful and using it as an opportunity is key. And I think we'll all be better for it.
And I would just add to that is because, again, when everything feels like it's spinning out of control, we can control certain aspects. We can control what it is that we eat, how often we eat, how much we eat. We can control our fitness to make sure that we are doing something good for our bodies every day. We can take charge of our personal health safety, and we can certainly control our rest and recovery. And that is very, very powerful and enabling at this particular trying time for all of us.
Thank you, Leslie and Todd. And I'd like to thank the audience for listening in today. We hope you came away from this discussion with some helpful information to help you prioritize your health, your well-being, and your performance as we navigate this uncertain time in our lives. And while we may be training alone, we're all in this together. If we didn't get to your question, look for a follow-up email shortly, since we're out of time. Feel free to send us any additional questions that you have or any comments via email at info@cleanathlete.com. On behalf of Clean Athlete, I wish you health, safety, and peace of mind as you continue to pursue your goals and dreams. Thank you.